Anthony Tony Baker woke up in his tidy bedroom in suburban Philadelphia, just as he had every morning for the past 12 years. Sunlight filtered through the thin white curtains, casting soft shadows on the wooden floor. Lying nearby, snoring slightly in her sleep, was Melissa, his wife, the woman with whom he shared this bed, this house, and this life. Tony stretched, feeling the usual heaviness of a Tuesday morning, and glanced at the alarm clock. 6:45. Time to get up, time to start the day. Tony always thought his marriage was perfect. Of course, he was not blind over time. The passion, the same spark that made their hearts beat faster in the early years, faded a little. But it was natural, wasn't it? 12 years together, 2 children, a mortgage, work life left its mark. And yet, despite this, he felt that he and Melissa remained close. Not in the superficial sense that people often mean when they talk about family routine, but in something deeper, more lasting. They were a team. He quietly slipped out from under the blanket, trying not to wake her. Melissa lay on her side, her blonde hair scattered across the pillow, and her face, even in sleep, retained that soft smile that he loved so much. Tony put on his slippers and walked down the corridor, looking into the children's room. 10-year-old Emma slept, hugging a teddy bear, and 7-year-old Jacob sprawled on the bed like the little king of his world. Both of them inherited Melissa's features, blonde hair and large, expressive eyes, although Jacob's character, stubborn and a little cocky, clearly came from his father. Tony walked downstairs into their cozy kitchen, with the white cabinets and wood countertops that he and Melissa had chosen together 5 years ago when they were renovating. He turned on the coffee maker, enjoying the familiar gurgling sound and aroma of freshly ground beans. It was their ritual. He would make the coffee, she would come down later in her favorite blue robe, and they would exchange plans for the day. Sometimes the children would join them, demanding cereal or toast, but most of the time the morning belonged to just the two of them. Tony was a financial analyst for a large company downtown. The work required concentration and patience, but he loved it for the order it brought into his life. The numbers did not lie, did not betray. Unlike people, they were always predictable. He built a career from scratch, starting with a small company after college, and could now proudly say that he was providing for his family. A 3-bedroom house, 2 cars in the garage, an annual vacation to the Jersey Shore, all this was the result of his work. And of course, Melissa's work. She worked in marketing, and her career was also taking off. Melissa was the one who knew how to find a common language with people, convince them, inspire them. Her charm opened doors, and her sharp mind held positions. Tony often joked that she could sell ice to Eskimos, and she laughed, brushing off the compliment. They met at a party with mutual friends, he, a little awkward in his formal suit, and she, beaming in a simple black dress. Then he didn't even hope that she would pay attention to him, but after 3 hours of talking about books, music, and dreams, he realized that he was lost. The wedding was modest but warm in a small garden outside the city, with 50 guests and live music. Emma arrived 2 years later, Jacob another 3. Life went on as usual, and although there were difficulties, quarrels over trifles, fatigue from work, sleepless nights with children, they always found a way to return to each other. Tony appreciated that. He believed that their connection was not just a habit, but something more, something that would withstand any test. He poured coffee into 2 mugs, black for himself, with a drop of cream for her, and placed them on the table. Outside the window, the usual morning noise had already begun. A neighbor was walking his dog, a school bus was honking at the corner. Tony sat down at the table, opened his laptop, and ran his eyes over the morning reports. His day was planned, meeting with clients at 10, analyzing quarterly data in the afternoon, and in the evening he promised Emma to help with a natural history project. Melissa had to pick Jacob up from soccer practice, the usual family logistics that had been fine-tuned over the years. Footsteps were heard from above. Melissa came down, tying the belt of her robe. Her hair was a little disheveled, but she looked fresh as always. "Good morning," she said, smiling, and Tony felt the familiar warmth in his chest. She picked up her mug, took a sip, and leaned against the countertop, looking at him. "How did you sleep?" she asked. Her voice was soft, with a slight hoarseness that appeared in the morning. "Fine. And you?" he replied, closing his laptop. "Fine. I just dreamed about something strange. I don't remember anymore." She shrugged and turned to the window. Tony nodded, not paying any attention to it. They often shared such little things, dreams, thoughts, plans. It was part of their closeness, part of what made their marriage special. He stood up, walked over to her, and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. She tensed slightly, but immediately relaxed, placing her hand on top of his. "Shall we do something together tonight? How about we order some pizza and watch a movie?" he suggested. "Sounds good," she replied, turning her head to kiss his cheek. Her lips were warm and Tony smiled. The children began to come down, filling the kitchen with noise and laughter. Emma was saying something about school. Jacob was demanding chocolate milk. Melissa joined the morning rush, giving directions while checking her phone. Tony looked at this picture, his family, his world, and felt that everything was in its place. He didn't know that this day would be the last time he could think like that. So far, for Tony, his marriage has been perfect. Yes, the passion had faded, but the intimacy remained in the little things, in the habits, in the way they moved through life together. He trusted Melissa, he trusted their family, and he could not even imagine that all this was a fragile facade that was about to begin to crumble. But that was yet to come. In the meantime, Tony finished his coffee, kissed the tops of the kids' heads, and walked out to the car, ready for the day. Melissa waved to him from the window, and he waved back, not suspecting that in the evening his world would turn upside down. Tony sat in their cozy dining room, the soft candlelight reflecting off the glasses of red wine. The romantic dinner was his idea. He wanted to surprise Melissa after a busy week at work. The children spent the night with their grandmother. The house was quiet. Only a light jazz melody flowed from the speakers. He prepared her favorite dish, chicken in a creamy sauce with mushrooms, and for dessert there was a chocolate cake from that small pastry shop that they both adored. Melissa looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair pulled back into a loose bun and her eyes sparkling in the dim light. They laughed, reminiscing about old stories, and Tony felt like it was one of those evenings that reminded him why he loved her so much. They were already finishing their wine when he noticed that her smile had become somewhat strained. She put the glass down, her fingers trembling slightly, and suddenly a quiet sob broke the silence. Tony froze, the fork with a piece of cake hovering in the air. "Melissa, what's happened?" he asked, leaning across the table towards her. His voice was full of anxiety, but he tried to control himself. She raised her eyes, and he saw that they were full of tears. Her lips trembled, and she covered her face with her hands, as if trying to hide from him. Tony pushed his chair back, walked around the table, and knelt down next to her, gently touching her shoulder. "Mel, honey, tell me what's going on." "You're scaring me," he said, trying to catch her eye. She shook her head, her breathing ragged, as if she was choking with emotion. Finally, she removed her hands from her face and looked at him. Her cheeks were wet, her mascara was slightly smeared under her eyes, but there was something else in her gaze, a mixture of guilt and fear. "Tony, I need to tell you something," she began, her voice trembling like a thin string ready to break. He nodded, squeezing her hand. "Speak. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." Melissa swallowed, her fingers gripping his palm so tightly that her nails dug into his skin. She took a deep breath and blurted out, "I cheated on you." The words hung in the air like a clap of thunder on a clear day. Tony felt his body go numb. He looked at her, not understanding, not believing, expecting her to laugh and say that it was a joke. But she was silent, her eyes were glued to his face, and there was not a hint of a lie in them. His heart began to pound, his throat tightened, and his head began to spin in a chaos of thoughts. "What? What did you say?" he finally squeezed out. His voice was hoarse, almost alien. "I cheated on you, Tony," she repeated, and now the tears flowed with renewed vigor. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back her sobs. "It happened once. Error. I didn't want to." Tony let go of her hand and stumbled back, almost falling. He stood up, leaning on the edge of the table so as not to lose his balance. His mind refused to accept it. Melissa, the woman with whom he shared everything, cheated on him. It was impossible. This did not fit into his picture of the world. When, he asked, his voice harsh, almost accusing. She cringed as if from a blow. 2 weeks ago, at a party with colleagues, I drank too much, and there was this guy from the sales department. What's his name? He interrupted, his tone becoming cold as ice. Tony, please, it doesn't matter, she begged, standing up and holding out her arms to him. It was just a moment of weakness. I don't even really know him. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? He raised his voice, and she shuddered. Tony rarely screamed, but now he couldn't help himself. You sleep with someone behind my back, and then you sit here, eat this damn dinner I cooked for you, and say that it didn't mean anything. Melissa began to sob even harder, her shoulders shaking. I know I'm to blame. I hate myself for this, but I love you, Tony. I didn't mean to hurt you. He turned away, running his hands over his face. His chest was compressed, as if someone had squeezed all the air out of it. He wanted to scream, to break something, but instead he just stood there, trying to comprehend. 12 years old. Children. Their home. Everything that he considered unshakable was suddenly under threat. Why are you telling me this now? He asked quietly, without looking at her. His voice trembled with suppressed emotions. Because I couldn't keep quiet any longer, she replied, her words punctuated by sobs. I tried to pretend that nothing had happened, but it was eating me up from the inside. I don't want to lie to you, Tony. You deserve the truth. He turned to her, his eyes full of pain and anger. Do I deserve the truth? What do I deserve, Mel? For my wife to have sex with some random guy at a party? Is this what I deserve after everything I've done for us? She flinched at his words, but did not look away. No, you didn't deserve this. I screwed up. I know, but I swear it was only one time, and it won't happen again. I will do everything for you to believe me. Tony laughed, a short, bitter laugh that sounded more like a groan. Did you believe it? Are you serious? How can I trust you after this? Because I love you, she shouted, taking a step towards him. Her hands reached for his chest, but he pulled away. Tony, please give me a chance. We can survive this. I don't want to lose our family. He looked at her, and at that moment hundreds of images flashed through his head. Their first meeting, their wedding, the birth of Emma, their trips to the lake. All this now seemed tainted, spoiled. He wanted to hit her, not physically, but with words, so that she would feel at least some of the pain that was tearing him apart. But instead he just stood there, feeling tears sting his own eyes. Who is he? He asked again. His voice became quieter, but there was a dangerous note in it. Tony, it doesn't matter. She started, but he interrupted. Who is he, Melissa? He barked, and she cringed. His name is Chris, she finally whispered. Chris Holden, new guy from the sales department, but I swear it was just. Enough, he cut her off. I don't want to listen to your excuses anymore. He went to the window, looking out at the dark street. The streetlights illuminated the empty sidewalk, and that emptiness reflected what he felt inside. Melissa came up behind her, her steps unsteady. Tony, what are you going to do? She asked quietly, her voice filled with fear. He didn't answer immediately. His mind was in turmoil. He wanted to leave, slam the door, and disappear. But where? This was his home, his life, and the children. What will happen to Emma and Jacob? He closed his eyes, trying to pull himself together. I don't know, he said finally, turning to her. His face was pale, his eyes red from unshed tears. I don't know, Mel, but I can't look at you now. She nodded, biting her lip. I'll go to the guest room. I'll give you time. But, Tony, please, think about us. I will do everything to fix this. He didn't answer. She slowly left the room, her footsteps fading on the stairs. Tony was left alone, surrounded by the remains of their dinner candles that were burning out, empty glasses, cold food. He collapsed into a chair, dropping his head into his hands. His world, so perfect an hour ago, now lay in ruins, and he didn't know if he could put it back together. Tony didn't sleep all night. After Melissa went into the guest room, he stayed in the dining room, staring at the dying candles until the wax ran across the tablecloth, leaving dark stains. The silence of the house pressed on him, as if the walls were compressing, squeezing out the last drops of calm from him. He turned over her words in his head. I cheated on you. It was just one time. I love you. And each of them cut like a knife. His mind raced between rage and despair, between the desire to leave and the need to understand. He stood up, walked around the room, then went down to the living room, where he poured himself a whiskey from the bottle they kept for special occasions. But even the sharp taste of alcohol did not drown out the pain. By morning, his eyes were red from tears and fatigue, and his throat was raw from suppressed screams. He sat on the sofa, staring into space, when the first rays of sun broke through the curtains. The same question was running through my head. How did they get to this point? He recalled their life 12 years, full of ups and downs, but always together. Was it all a lie? Or is it really a mistake like she said? Tony didn't know what to believe, but he knew one thing for sure: he was not ready to lose his family. Not now. Not like that. When Melissa came downstairs, he was still sitting on the couch, clutching his empty glass. She looked exhausted. Her hair was disheveled. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her blue robe hung on her like on a hanger. She stopped at the door, not daring to come closer, her gaze full of anxiety and guilt. Tony, her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Are you okay? He looked up, and at that moment the anger that had been simmering in him all night flared up with renewed vigor. In order, are you seriously asking me this? His tone was sharp, but he immediately stopped short, seeing how she flinched. Tony took a deep breath, trying to control himself. No, Mel, I'm not okay. Not okay at all. She nodded, biting her lip, and slowly walked over to the chair opposite him. She sat down with her hands folded on her knees, like a schoolgirl in front of a strict teacher. I know you hate me now, she began, her voice shaking. And I don't blame you, but I want to talk, if you're ready. Tony looked at her, and conflicting feelings fought in his chest. Part of him wanted to scream, to kick her out, to erase her from his life. But the other part, the part that still remembered their first dance, their laughter, their children, clung to hope. He put the glass down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Okay, he said finally, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Speak. Melissa swallowed, her fingers nervously fiddling with the hem of her robe. I don't know where to start. I spent the whole night thinking about what I had done, about how it hurts you, and I understand that no words will correct what I did. But I want you to know that it wasn't about you. It was about me, my weakness, my stupidity. Your stupidity? He interrupted, his brows furrowed. Do you think this is an excuse? You got drunk and slept with some Chris from sales, and it's just your stupidity. She closed her eyes as if his words had hit her physically. No, that's not an excuse. This is the explanation. I didn't look for this, Tony. I didn't plan to. We were at a party, I drank more than I should have, and he was there, chatting with me, joking. I felt, I don't know, alive or something. It's as if I'm again the girl I was before children, before all this routine, and I succumbed to this feeling. But as soon as it happened, I realized that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Tony listened, and every word she said was like salt in the wound. He clenched his teeth, trying to hold back his emotions. Did you feel alive? So, do I make you feel dead? 12 years old, Mel. I work, I try, I build this family, and you go and find a life with some random guy. No, she exclaimed, her eyes widening. Tony, this is not about you. You are the best husband, the best father. It's me. I lost myself somewhere along the way. Work, children, home, I love our life, but sometimes I'm just tired of being just a mother and wife. It's not your fault. This is mine. He leaned back, running his hands through his hair. Her words sounded sincere, but they did not extinguish the fire inside him. You could have talked to me, say you feel bad, but instead you went and destroyed everything we had. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she made no attempt to wipe them away. I had to, and I regret that I didn't do this. But I'm here, Tony. I'm telling you the truth. I want to fix this. I want us back. He looked at her, and at that moment his heart was breaking. He hated her for what she did, but he loved her so much it hurt. He remembered Emma and Jacob, their happy faces, their home. Is he really ready to give up everything because of one mistake? His mind screamed yes, but his heart whispered no. How can I trust you after this? He asked quietly, his voice full of pain. How can I be sure that you won't do this again? Melissa stood up and walked over to him, kneeling down in front of the couch. She took his hands in hers, and he didn't move away. You can't be sure, she said, looking into his eyes. Not right away, but I swear to you, Tony, I will do anything to earn your trust. I will go to a psychologist. I will quit if necessary, so as not to see these people. I will be open with you about everything. Just give me a chance. He was silent, feeling the warmth of her hands. His anger still seethed, but weariness and love began to take over. He thought about the children, about how they would grow up without her if he left, about how he himself will live without her. It was unbearable. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said finally, his voice shaking. But I don't want to destroy our family. Not because of this. I'll give you a chance, Mel. But it will be hard. It's very difficult. She nodded, her face lighting up with faint hope. I know, and I'm ready to work on it. We will work together, I promise. Tony squeezed her hands, and at that moment the tears he had been holding back all night finally burst out. He cried quietly, silently, but it was liberation. Melissa hugged him, and he didn't push her away. They sat for so long in silence, interrupted only by their breathing. What's next? He asked when the tears had dried and his voice returned. We'll start small, she replied, not letting go of him. We'll talk, honestly, every day, and maybe we'll find someone who can help us figure it out. Family therapist. He nodded, too exhausted to argue. Fine, but if I feel even a hint of a lie. You won't feel it, she interrupted, her tone firm. I won't lie anymore. Never. Tony looked at her, and in her eyes he saw the Melissa he had loved all these years. Maybe she was still there, underneath the layers of pain and mistakes. He didn't know if they would succeed, but he decided to try. For themselves, for the children, for what they built. Okay, he said quietly. Let's try. They stood up, still holding hands, and went to the kitchen. The morning went on, life went on, and despite the crack in their marriage, they took the first step to mend it. Tony didn't know what lay ahead, but in that moment he chose hope. 3 days later, Tony was feeling a little better. After that sleepless night and the difficult conversation with Melissa, he allowed himself to believe that maybe they could get through this. They started talking more than usual, not only about her infidelity, but also about little things, about work, about children, about fixing the faucet in the bathroom. It wasn't easy every time he looked at her. He saw a shadow of Chris from the sales department, but he tried. For Emma and Jacob, for their family, he forced himself to move forward. Melissa tried too. She was attentive, open, even made an appointment with a therapist, as she promised. Tony was starting to think that maybe this really was a one-time mistake that they could get over. It was Friday evening. The kids were still at Grandma's, and Tony decided to have a quiet evening at home. He ordered pizza pepperoni for himself, mushroom for Melissa, and they settled into the living room watching TV. There was some old movie on the screen that they both loved, but Tony was looking more at her than at the screen. She sat cross-legged, wearing her favorite gray sweatshirt, and seemed relaxed. Her smile when he handed her the slice of pizza was soft, almost like before. He found himself thinking that maybe they could actually go back to the way things were. They ate, laughed at the stupid jokes in the movie, and Tony felt the tension of the last few days release a little. He reached out and squeezed her hand, and she responded with a light squeeze. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot, as if they were a team again. After dinner, they put away the pizza boxes and Tony went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. He was standing at the sink when he heard her footsteps behind him. "Tony," she called, and there was something strange in her voice that made him freeze. He turned around, glass in hand, and saw her standing in the doorway, her face pale, her hands nervously fiddling with the hem of her sweatshirt. "What?" he asked, putting the glass on the tabletop. His heart accelerated, anticipating something bad. Melissa took a step forward, her gaze glued to the floor. "I need to tell you something," she began quietly, and Tony felt the blood drain from his face. These words, the same ones she had said 3 days ago, echoed in his head. "No," he blurted out before he could stop himself. He raised his hand as if he could stop her. "Don't say that. Don't you dare." But she raised her eyes, and they had the same look of guilt as before. "Tony, I did it again," she said, her voice shaking. "I cheated on you." The world around Tony seemed to freeze. He looked at her, unable to believe that this was happening again. His mind refused to accept her words, but they were already hitting him like a hammer blow. He clenched his fists, his nails dug into his palms, and his voice when he spoke was low and dangerous. "What did you say?" he asked, although he heard every word. "I cheated on you," she repeated, and now tears were streaming down her cheeks. "With our neighbor, Michael. It was yesterday when you were at work. I I don't know how this happened." Tony felt the rage he had been holding in for 3 days burst out like hot lava. He stepped towards her, his face contorted with anger. "You don't know how this happened? Are you kidding me, Melissa? 3 days ago you swore to me that this wouldn't happen again, and now you're saying you slept with Michael, with our neighbor who lives across the street." She stepped back, her hands shaking. "Tony, please listen to me. It was a mistake, A mistake," he yelled, his voice echoing off the walls. He grabbed the glass from the table and threw it into the sink, where it shattered into pieces. Melissa screamed, covering her face with her hands, but he didn't stop. "You promised me. You stood here, looked into my eyes, and swore that you would do everything to make me believe you. Now what? You just went and lay with Michael like nothing happened?" "This is wrong," she shouted back, her voice breaking. "I didn't want this. He came over yesterday to help with the lawnmower. We talked, drank beer, and you decided to take him to bed?" he interrupted, his words full of venom. "Are you serious? You invite a neighbor into our house where our children are growing up, and sleep with him? What's wrong with you, Melissa?" She began to sob and sank into a chair. "I don't know. I hate myself for this. But I couldn't stop, Tony. It's like I have no control over myself." He froze, looking at her. Her words sounded absurd, but something in her tone, in her calmness in the midst of this nightmare, made his blood run cold. She cried, but she acted like it was normal, like they hadn't discussed this 3 days ago, like he hadn't given her the second chance that had torn his heart to pieces. "You're acting like it's no big deal," he said slowly, his voice shaking with rage and confusion. "You sit here, admit to yet another betrayal, and pretend that we didn't talk about this before. What's going on with you?" Melissa raised her head, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know, Tony. I should have told you. I don't want to lie." "Don't want to lie," he laughed, but it was a bitter, almost insane laugh. "You destroy everything we have and say you don't want to lie. Do you even understand what you're doing to me? With us?" She stood up, holding out her hands to him, but he recoiled as if from fire. "Tony, please, I love you. I don't want to lose you. We can survive this like last time." "Like last time?" He looked at her, his face white with shock. "Are you serious? Do you think I'll give you a chance again after this? You're sleeping with your neighbor 3 days after I forgave you for Chris, and you think I'm just going to swallow it?" "I don't know what's wrong with me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I want to fix it. I will do whatever you say." Tony turned his back to her, resting his hands on the tabletop. His breathing was heavy, his chest tightening with pain and anger. He wanted to scream, to hit something, but instead he just stood there, trying to comprehend. Michael, a neighbor he'd known for years, a tall, friendly guy with a perfect lawn and a stupid dog that always barked in the morning. This Michael was now in his home, with his wife, in his life. "Get out," he said finally, without turning around. His voice was cold as steel. "Tony, please," she began, but he turned abruptly. "Get out of the kitchen, Melissa. I can't look at you now," he barked, and she backed away, her face contorted in fear. She nodded, wiping away her tears, and slowly walked out of the room. Tony was left alone, surrounded by silence and shards of glass in the sink. His hands were shaking, his heart was pounding, and his mind was screaming in pain. 3 days. Only 3 days had passed, and she had broken his heart again. And the worst thing was the way she behaved calmly, as if it was a small thing, as if their conversation 3 days ago had meant nothing. He didn't understand. He didn't know what to do. After Melissa left the kitchen, Tony stood at the countertop, staring at the broken glass in the sink. His hands were still shaking, and his head was buzzing with rage and pain. He couldn't believe this was happening again, just 3 days after he'd given her a second chance, after all her tears and promises. Michael, the neighbor across the street, with his goofy smile and lawnmower, was now part of this nightmare. Tony felt betrayed, humiliated, crushed. He wanted to leave, pack his things and disappear, but his feet seemed rooted to the floor. This was his home, his life, and he did not know how to escape from this hell. He walked into the living room, collapsing on the couch where just an hour ago they had been laughing at a movie. The pizza was still on the table, cold and untouched, a mockery of their evening. Tony covered his face with his hands, trying to drown out the chaos in his head. He recalled her words, "I don't know how this happened. I don't control myself." They sounded like excuses, but there was something strange in her voice, a calmness that did not fit with the situation. It drove him crazy. He wanted to hate her, to cut her out of his life, but every time he thought about Emma and Jacob, his resolve crumbled. Footsteps were heard from above. Tony tensed as he heard Melissa slowly walking down the stairs. He didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her voice, but she still entered the living room. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes red from crying, and her hands nervously gripping the hem of her sweatshirt. Tony turned away, staring at the wall, but it didn't go away. "Tony," she began quietly, her voice shaking, "please listen to me." "I don't want to hear anything," he snapped, his tone cold and harsh. "You've said enough. Leave." But she didn't leave. Instead, she took a step forward and, to his shock, knelt down in front of the sofa. Tony turned around, not believing his eyes. Melissa, his proud, confident wife, was on her knees, her hands clasped in a pleading gesture as tears streamed down her face. "Tony, I'm begging you," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't leave me. Don't destroy our family. I know what I did, and I hate myself for it, but I'm asking you to give me another chance." He looked at her, his anger mixed with confusion. She looked pathetic, broken, and it tore his heart. "Get up," he barked, but she shook her head. "No, I won't get up until you listen to me," she said, her tone full of desperation. "I know that I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was terrible. But I love you, Tony. I love our children. I don't want it to end because of my stupidity." "Nonsense," he raised his voice, leaning towards her. "You call this stupidity? You're sleeping with your neighbor 3 days after I forgave you for Chris, and that's just stupid. Do you even understand what you're doing to me?" She began to sob, her shoulders shaking. "I understand. I see how you suffer, and it kills me. I don't know why I did it, Tony. I swear I didn't mean to. Michael came, we were talking, and suddenly everything went wrong. I hate myself for this." Tony gritted his teeth, his fists clenching. "Do you hate yourself? How do I feel, Melissa? I gave you a chance, I believed you, and you spat in my face. How can I trust you after this?" She raised her head, her eyes were full of tears, but determination burned in them. "You don't have to trust me right now. I know I destroyed everything we had. But I'm begging you, Tony, Give me a chance to prove that I can change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever you say. Just don't go. Don't leave me alone." He looked at her, and his rage began to give way to pain. She was on her knees, humiliating herself in front of him, and this was not like the Melissa he knew. She had always been strong, independent, and now she looked like a shadow of herself. Tony wanted to push her away, to tell her it was over, but something inside him trembled. "Why should I do this?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling. "Why should I risk my heart again when you break it over and over again?" "Because I love you," she replied, her words barely audible through her tears. "And because you are a better person than me. You've always been stronger than me, Tony. You are the one who holds us together. I know I don't deserve you, but I'm begging for Emma, for Jacob, for what we had. Give me another chance." He closed his eyes, feeling tears burning his own eyelids. Her words about children hit where it hurt most. He imagined Emma asking why Dad left, Jacob looking at him with confusion. He didn't want to be the one to destroy their world. But how could he stay after all this? "You are asking the impossible," he said, opening his eyes. "Do you have any idea how much it hurts me? I haven't slept since your first confession, and now this. I don't know if I can look at you without seeing Michael or that Chris." She reached out and grabbed his palms, her fingers cold and trembling. "Then hate me, Tony. Yell at me, punish me, but don't leave. I'll accept whatever you say. I will fight for us, even if you don't believe in me. Just give me a chance." He looked at her hands squeezing him and felt his resolve melt away. He hated himself for it, for his weakness, for not being able to just get up and leave. But he loved her. Even after all this, he still loved her, and that was the worst thing. "You'll break me, Mel," he whispered, his voice breaking. "If this happens again, I won't be able to stand it." "It won't happen again," she said, her tone firmer. "I swear to you, Tony, I will do everything to prevent this from happening again. I will be open with you. I will be at home. I will not even look in Michael's direction. Just tell me you're giving me a chance." He was silent, his chest tightening with pain and doubt. She was still on her knees, her face wet with tears, and she looked so vulnerable it was tearing him apart. Finally, he exhaled, as if releasing some of his rage. "Okay," he said quietly, almost against his will. "I'll give you one more chance. But this is the last one, Melissa. If you do this again, I will leave, and no amount of tears will stop me." She nodded, her face lighting up with faint hope. "Thank you, Tony. I won't let you down. I promise." He pulled away, removing his hands, and stood up from the couch. "I'm going to bed," he said tiredly. "I need to be alone." Melissa rose from her knees, wiping away her tears. "I understand. Good night, Tony. And thank you." He didn't answer, silently walking up the stairs. In the bedroom, he collapsed on the bed without undressing and stared at the ceiling. He forgave her again, but deep down he felt that this decision might become his greatest regret. However, he made a choice for the sake of his family, for the sake of the love that still glimmered in him. For now he was holding on to this thin thread, not knowing how much longer it would hold. Tony sat clutching a mug of cold coffee. It's been a week since he forgave Melissa for the second time after she confessed to cheating with Michael, a neighbor across the street. He gave her another chance because she begged him on her knees, because he didn't want to destroy the family, because he still loved her despite the pain. But this week was the beginning of a nightmare that he could neither understand nor stop. The situation repeated itself over and over again, like an ominous cycle from which there was no way out. It all started on Monday. They were sitting in the living room, watching TV, when Melissa suddenly fell silent, her face turning pale. Tony already knew this looked the same one he had before her previous confessions. His heart sank, but he forced himself to ask, "What happened, Mel?" She looked at him, her eyes filling with tears, and said, "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the coffee shop where I get my latte in the morning. His name is Justin. It was today after work." Tony felt the floor disappear from under his feet. He jumped up, his voice breaking into a cry. Are you kidding me? Again, 4 days after Michael? She cried, swore that it was a mistake, that she didn't mean to, but he no longer listened. He went into the bedroom, slamming the door, and lay awake all night, clenching his fists. In the morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She prepared breakfast, smiled, and asked how he slept. Tony looked at her, his mind screaming with incomprehension. How could she forget? How could she act as if yesterday's conversation never happened? The next day, Tuesday, everything happened again. They were having dinner, and she started again. Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a colleague, his name is Ryan. It was during lunch break. He threw down his fork, his face contorted with rage. You're sick, Melissa. What's wrong with you? He yelled, but she just cried, repeating that she was sorry, that she loved him. He went to the garage, where he sat half the night, trying to calm down. In the morning, the same picture again. She hummed in the kitchen, as if nothing had happened, asking if he wanted an omelet. By Wednesday, Tony began to suspect that he was losing his mind. He was awake, his eyes were red, and his nerves were on edge. In the evening, she confessed again, this time to the delivery driver who brought the package. His name was Eric. Tony didn't scream anymore, he just looked at her, feeling like something was breaking inside. Why? He asked quietly, but she just shrugged, repeating, I don't know, Tony. I didn't want to. The next day, she behaved normally again, as if nothing had happened, and this completely unsettled him. He decided to record her confessions. On Thursday, he took an old tape recorder out of a drawer in his office, put it in his pocket, and turned it on when they sat down to dinner. Like clockwork, Melissa began, Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the gym, his name is Kyle. It was in the morning. He nodded silently, feeling his fingers tremble as the recorder recorded every word. Do you understand what you are doing to me? He asked, his voice hoarse with fatigue. She cried, I know I'm to blame. I love you, Tony. I'm sorry. He didn't answer, just went into the bedroom, clutching the recorder in his hand. On Friday morning, he turned on the recording. Her voice, calm and guilty, sounded from a small speaker. I cheated on you. With a guy from the gym, his name is Kyle. Tony listened, his heart pounding in horror. It was real. This is not a dream, not a hallucination. But when he came downstairs, Melissa was standing at the stove, frying bacon and smiling. Good morning, honey, she said cheerfully. Did you sleep well? He froze, holding the recorder in his pocket. Do you remember what we talked about yesterday? He asked, carefully watching her reaction. She frowned as if confused. Yesterday? We watched the news, right? What are you talking about? Tony felt a chill run down his spine. He pulled out a recorder and played the recording right in front of her. Her voice filled the kitchen. I cheated on you with the guy from the gym. Melissa looked at him, her face turning chalk white. What is it, Tony? She asked, her tone genuinely surprised. When did I say that? You said it yesterday, he shouted, throwing the recorder on the table. You admitted that you slept with Kyle, and now you pretend that nothing happened. Are you kidding me? She stepped back, her eyes widening. Tony, I don't remember this. I swear I don't know what you're talking about. She looked scared, but there was no lie in her voice, only confusion. He grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into her skin. You're lying. You can't help but remember. You do this every day, Melissa. Every damn day there's a new guy, and then you pretend everything's fine. Tony, please let me go, she begged, her voice trembling. I don't know what's happening. I don't remember any Kyle. He let her go, staggering back. His breathing was heavy, his chest tightening with panic. She looked genuinely confused, but the recording didn't lie. He heard her voice, saw her tears last night. It was real. But why did she act like she didn't remember anything? On Friday evening, everything happened again. They were sitting at the table, and she said, Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the park, his name is Lucas. It was today when I was walking. He no longer screamed. He simply turned on the recorder, recorded her words, and watched her cry and swear her love. On Saturday morning, she smiled again, asked what he wanted for breakfast, and didn't react when he mentioned Lucas. Tony felt his mind crumbling. He wrote down all the confessions Justin, Ryan, Eric, Kyle, Lucas, and listened to them at night, making sure he wasn't going crazy. But her behavior the next day was the same every time. She didn't remember anything. By Sunday, he was on edge. His eyes were sunken, his hands were shaking, and his voice became hoarse from constant screaming. He was sitting in his office, listening to tapes, when Melissa entered. "Tony, I need to tell you something," she began, and he raised his hand to stop her. "No need," he said wearily. "I know what you will say. You cheated on me. With someone new. So." She nodded, her face turning guilty again. "Yes. With the guy from the store. His name is Sean. It was today." He laughed a dry, crazy laugh. "Sean? Great. Another one for the collection." He turned on the recorder, recorded her words, and turned it off. "And tomorrow you will forget again, right? Will you make me coffee and smile as if nothing happened?" She blinked, her tears streaming down her cheeks. "Tony, I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to be honest with you." "Honest?" He stood up, his voice breaking. "You are destroying me, Melissa. Every day is a new blow, and then you pretend that everything is fine. I'm going crazy because of you." She fell to her knees, just like last time, and grabbed his hands. "Tony, forgive me. I love you. I don't know why this is happening, but I don't want to lose you." He tore his hands away and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. His mind was in chaos. He didn't know what to do, believe her, hate her, leave or stay. But he knew one thing for sure. This could not continue. He was losing himself, and if this continues, there will be nothing left of him. Tony Baker sat in his office, surrounded by the silence of the house, which now seemed ominous to him. It had been almost a month since Melissa had begun her daily confessions, and he had already lost count of her lovers: Justin, Ryan, Eric, Kyle, Lucas, Sean, the names running into an endless list that he recorded on a tape recorder like a man possessed. His mind was on edge, but in recent days he had begun to notice something strange: details that were repeating themselves like a broken record. It wasn't just Melissa's madness, it was something more, and he felt that if he didn't figure it out, he would completely lose himself. It all started with a little thing. On Monday, when Melissa admitted to cheating on her with a bartender named Trevor, Tony noticed that she was wearing the same blue blouse as the day she told about Kyle from the gym. He didn't think much of it. She had several favorite things that she often wore. But the next day, when she mentioned a guy from the library named Oliver, she was wearing the blouse again. Tony frowned as he looked at her across the table during dinner. "You didn't change your clothes?" he asked sharply. She looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I changed after work," she answered, and her voice was so sincere that he doubted himself. But in the evening, rummaging through a basket of dirty laundry, he did not find any traces of other clothes, only the same blue blouse, slightly wrinkled, lay on top. The next day, he turned his attention to the calendar. Melissa confessed to cheating with a plumber named Paul, and Tony automatically glanced at the date, March 15th. He froze because he remembered that March 15th was the day she told Sean from the store. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the calendar entries. The dates had not changed. Every day when she confessed, the calendar in the kitchen showed March 15th, although the time on the clock and on his phone moved forward. He tore the piece of paper from the calendar, crumpled it, and threw it away. But the next morning the calendar hung in place again, and the date was the same, March 15th. Tony felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Then there were messages. His colleague Steve sent him the same message. "Hey Tony, don't forget to report by Friday, 3 days in a row, word for word, at 9:32 am. Tony checked his phone. Messages were coming, but the dates did not match reality. Family friend Mark wrote, "How are you, old man? We need to meet on the weekend," twice, with the same wording at the same time. Even the children, when they called from their grandmother, said the same phrases. Emma asked about a school project, and Jacob complained of boredom. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was like a script that someone had played out over and over again. Tony felt like he was going crazy. He began to record not only Melissa's confessions, but also these details: clothes, dates, messages. Every evening he sat down in his office, turned on the recorder, and muttered, "Today she was wearing a blue blouse. The calendar shows March 15th. Steve wrote about the report at 9:32. His voice became increasingly hoarse and his eyes became empty. He tried to find logic, but there was none. Melissa continued her confessions: every day a new lover, every day tears and promises, and in the morning she acted as if nothing had happened. It was unbearable. On Friday, he decided to change things up. If things kept repeating themselves, he thought, then maybe he could break the cycle. In the morning, he called at work and said that he was taking an urgent business trip to New York. He made up a meeting with a client in order to leave the city. "I'll be back tomorrow," he told Melissa as he packed his bag. She looked at him with slight surprise. "Okay, darling. Be careful," she said, her voice as calm as always. Tony left, feeling strangely relieved that he would escape this nightmare, at least for a day. He spent the day in New York, wandering the streets, sitting in cafes, trying to distract himself. He didn't answer Melissa's calls, didn't check messages, just breathed, away from home, where his life had become hell. That night, he checked into a cheap motel room, lay down on the bed, and fell asleep for the first time in weeks without the sound of her voice in his head. In the morning, he felt a little better. Maybe this was the way out. Maybe if he stays away, everything will stop. But when he returned home on Saturday evening, hope was dashed. Melissa met him at the door, her face pale, her eyes full of tears. She was wearing the same blue blouse. "Tony, I need to tell you something," she began, and he closed his eyes, knowing that he was about to hear it. "I cheated on you. With a guy from a taxi service. His name is Dan. It was yesterday while you were away." Tony dropped his bag to the floor, his hands shaking. He looked at her, and his voice was full of despair. "Are you serious? I left to stop it, and you still found someone?" She cried as she stepped towards him. "I didn't mean to, Tony. I called a taxi to go grocery shopping, and it just happened. I love you. Forgive me." He staggered back, his mind reeling. "Did it just happen? Something just happens every day, Melissa. Do you understand that this is not normal? Do you even see what's happening?" "I know I'm to blame," she shouted, falling to her knees like last time. "I don't want to lose you. Give me one more chance." Tony looked at her, and his anger was replaced by something else: fear. He noticed that the calendar on the wall showed March 15th again. His phone vibrated with a message from Steve. "Hey, Tony, don't forget your report by Friday." Time, 9:32, although it was already 6 on Saturday evening. He grabbed the phone and threw it against the wall. It shattered into pieces. Melissa screamed, but he didn't stop. "Do you see this?" he yelled, pointing at the calendar. "The date does not change. The messages are the same. Your blouse, you wear it every time you confess. It's not just cheating, Melissa. It's something wrong." She raised her head, her face wet with tears. "Tony, what are you talking about? I don't understand. I just want to be with you." He collapsed on the sofa, covering his face with his hands. His heart was pounding and his mind was screaming in terror. He tried to leave, change events, but nothing worked. She still found a way to confess. She still ruined it again. In the morning, she will smile again, as if nothing had happened, and he will be left with these notes, with this madness. He felt reality slipping from his hands, but did not know how to hold it. "I can't do it anymore," he whispered, without looking at her. "I don't know what's happening, but I can't." Melissa crawled towards him, grabbing his hand. "Tony, please don't give up. We can handle it. I love you." He didn't answer. His gaze was empty, and his thoughts were chaos. He noticed that her blouse smelled like the same shampoo it always did, and for some reason that was the last straw. He got up and went into the office, locked the door, and turned on the recorder. Today she confessed about Dan from the taxi. The blouse is the same. Calendar March 15th. "I left, but nothing changed." His voice was shaking. but he continued to write because it was the only thing keeping him sane. Tony couldn't trust his eyes or his mind anymore. Melissa's repeated confessions, the same details of blue blouse, the frozen date of March 15th, the same messages, all this turned his life into an endless nightmare. He recorded her words on a tape recorder and listened to them at night. But this did not give answers, it only pulled her deeper into the abyss. He decided that he had to find evidence, real, tangible evidence of her infidelity to make sure that this was not a figment of his imagination. If she really meets new men every day, then there should be traces. Calls, messages, the smell of someone else's cologne, whatever. Tony began to follow her. On Monday, he took a day off from work, lying about not feeling well. In the morning, when Melissa left for work, he waited until her car was around the corner and followed, keeping his distance. She parked at her downtown office, walked into the building, and Tony watched from his car across the street. She looked as usual, blue blouse, slight smile, bag over her shoulder. He sat there for 3 hours until she came out for lunch. Melissa went to a cafe across the street, ordered a salad and coffee, and sat alone, scrolling through her phone. No one approached her, no Ryan or Justin appeared. Tony frowned, gripping the steering wheel. Maybe she'll meet them later. In the evening, he checked her phone while she was taking a shower. Nothing, no suspicious calls, no messages, just correspondence with colleagues about work projects, and a couple of photos from the children sent by the grandmother. He even looked into her bag, but found only her wallet, keys, and lipstick. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, Tony sniffed secretly no strange cologne, just the familiar smell of her chamomile shampoo. She went to bed, and he sat in the dark, looking at her. She behaved absolutely normally when she thought he wasn't looking. She read a book, smiled at him before going to bed, even kissed him on the cheek. But that night she confessed again, this time to a guy from the laundry named Nathan. Tony wrote it down, but there was no evidence. On Tuesday, he went further. He installed a tracking app on her phone while she slept and tracked her location throughout the day. She was in the office, then in the supermarket, then at home. No deviations. He even walked down their street, looked into the laundry a block from the house. Only an elderly woman worked there, no Nathan. Tony returned home feeling both stupid and scared. Melissa was preparing dinner, humming something under her breath, and looked the same as always. But that evening she said, "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the bookstore, his name is James." He shouted at her, demanding an explanation, but she just cried, repeating that she was sorry. In the morning, there was silence again, smiles, no trace of James. By Wednesday, Tony decided he was the problem. Maybe he's going crazy. Maybe her confessions are hallucinations caused by stress. He made an appointment with a psychotherapist, Dr. Linda Crow, a woman with a soft voice and stern gaze. At the first session, he laid out everything: Melissa's endless infidelities, her strange behavior, repeating details. He even brought a tape recorder and played the recordings. Dr. Crow listened in silence, her face unreadable. "Tony, you are describing a very unusual situation," she said finally, tapping her pen on the pad. "Your wife admits to cheating, but you don't find any evidence. She acts like she doesn't remember anything. This may be due to your perception, perhaps stress or trauma is distorting reality, or perhaps she is hiding something deeper." "Do you think I'm making this up?" he asked, his voice shaking with anger. "I'm not saying you're lying," she replied calmly. "But our minds sometimes play tricks on us. Let's try to figure it out. Start keeping a diary, write down everything that happens, not only her words, but also your feelings, and come back in a week." Tony left the session feeling even worse. He wanted to believe that it was his mind, but the recordings were real: her voice, tears, names. He started keeping a diary, as Dr. Crow advised, but the situation did not change. That evening, Melissa admitted to cheating with a guy from a car wash named Todd. He watched her the whole next day. She didn't even go to the car wash. In the morning, she smiled again, as if nothing had happened. By the end of the week, Tony noticed something new, and it completely undermined his faith in reality. People around began to behave strangely. On Friday, he went out to buy coffee, and his neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, a usually grumpy old woman, suddenly smiled broadly at him and said, "It's a beautiful day, Tony, isn't it?" Her tone was too friendly, almost theatrical. Outside, a guy walking his dog waved at him, although Tony didn't know him. At the coffee shop, the barista, serving a latte, winked and said, "Hang in there, buddy," although Tony didn't say anything. It was even worse at work. Colleagues, usually immersed in their own affairs, smiled strangely at him across the tables. Steve, the one who sent the same messages, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Are you okay, old man?" with such a forced smile that Tony recoiled. Even the boss, Mr. Harris, a dry and formal man, suddenly asked, "How are things at home, Tony?" and his lips stretched in an unnatural grimace. Tony muttered something incomprehensible and ran into the restroom, where he looked at his reflection for a long time. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but he was still himself. Or not. On Saturday night, he went to a bar across the street from his house for a drink and a little distraction. He was sitting in the corner, sipping whiskey, when a stranger sat down next to him, a tall man in a dark jacket with a sharp gaze. Tony tensed, but he just smiled, looking straight into his eyes. "You're close," the stranger said quietly, his voice low and confident. Tony froze, the glass shaking in his hand. "What? What are you talking about?" he asked, but the man just stood up, patted him on the shoulder and left, disappearing into the crowd. Tony looked around. The bar was full, but no one was looking at him. He finished the whiskey in one gulp, feeling a chill run down his spine. What did this mean? Close to what? Melissa was waiting for him at home. She was wearing the same blue blouse, her eyes filled with tears again. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you with a guy from the bar. His name is Liam. It was today." He didn't shout or argue, he just turned on the recorder and recorded it. In the morning, she was making breakfast again, humming as if Liam had never existed. Tony returned to Dr. Crow for the next session, laying out everything. The surveillance, the lack of evidence, the strange behavior of others, the words of a stranger. She frowned, her calm cracking. "Tony, this sounds like a lot of stress. Perhaps you should take a vacation, take a break from everything." But he saw doubt in her eyes, and this only increased his fear. He left the office, feeling that the world around him was shrinking. People on the street smiled too widely, colleagues whispered behind his back, and Melissa continued to confess every evening. Tony wrote everything down in his diary, but there were no answers. He was trapped, and the words, "You're getting close," sounded in his head like a warning or a threat. Tony no longer knew where reality ended and his madness began. Months of Melissa's endless confessions, repeated details, strange behavior of others, and the words of a stranger in a bar, "You're already close," turned his life into a labyrinth from which there was no way out. He monitored his wife, went to a psychotherapist, wrote everything down in a diary, but nothing helped. Every night she confessed to a new betrayal, and in the morning she acted as if nothing had happened. He felt like he was drowning, but on Sunday morning everything changed. Tony lay in the bedroom staring at the ceiling while Melissa took a shower. He did not sleep. He again listened to her next confession on the recorder, recorded. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the pharmacy. His name is Brad. It was today." Her voice, full of tears, sounded the same as always, but he no longer shouted back. He simply recorded it like a robot. He turned off the recorder and glanced at the bedside table when something caught his attention. A small black dot in the corner of the lamp, almost invisible, but too symmetrical for a speck of dust. Tony frowned, stood up, and walked closer. He ran his finger along the base of the lamp and felt a slight protrusion. My heart began to pound. He took a screwdriver from the drawer and unscrewed the bottom cover. Inside, among the wires, lay a tiny camera with a blinking red light. Tony froze, his breathing becoming ragged. Camera in their bedroom. Someone was watching them. Behind him, he glanced at the bathroom door. The sound of water was still coming from there. His hand shook, but he quickly pulled out the camera, cutting off the wires, and hid it in his pocket. This was proof, the first real proof, that he was not crazy. But who did it, and why? He remained silent all day, watching Melissa. She behaved as usual. She prepared breakfast, smiled, and asked if he wanted pancakes. Tony nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He started checking the house. While she was in the kitchen, he searched the bedroom, under the bed, in the closet, behind the paintings. Nothing. Then the living room, and there, in the corner of the TV, I found another camera disguised as a propeller. In the office there is a third one, built into a bookshelf. His heart was pounding and his hands were covered in cold sweat. The house was full of cameras, and he lived under surveillance without even knowing it. In the evening, Melissa approached him again, her face turned pale, her eyes filled with tears. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the pizzeria, his name is Marco. It was today," she said, her voice shaking. Tony looked at her, clutching the camera in his pocket. "Are you serious?" he asked quietly, but inside he was already shaking with anger and fear. She nodded, falling to her knees. "I'm sorry, Tony. I love you." He didn't answer. He simply wrote down her words and went into the office, locking the door. There he began to dig deeper. He connected one of the cameras to his laptop, hoping to find something, a signal, a source, anything. After an hour of fiddling with wires and programs, he hacked at a data stream. An IP address and an encrypted signal appeared on the screen. Tony wasn't a hacker, but years of working in finance had taught him to understand systems. He downloaded tracking software and started searching. 2 hours later, the screen showed the result. The signal was coming from a building in an industrial area on the outskirts of Philadelphia, 20 miles from their home. Tony stayed up all night studying the data. He found old articles on the internet about secret experiments, behavioral studies funded by corporations. Nothing specific, but the words devotion, pain, human reactions came up again and again. His mind was spinning. The cameras, Melissa's confessions, the repeated details, everything began to add up to a horrifying picture. At dawn, he sneaked into the garage, took the tools, and drove to the address given by the program. The building turned out to be an abandoned warehouse, rusty gates, broken windows, silence. Tony parked to the side, took a flashlight and a crowbar, feeling the adrenaline rushing through his temples. He crawled through the hole in the fence and went inside. The floor was covered in dust, but in the corner he noticed a staircase leading down. His heart began to pound, but he came down. There was a corridor underground, lit by dim lamps, and a door with a combination lock. Tony remembered the IP address 192.168.1.15 and entered the last four numbers, 0115. The lock clicked and the door opened. Behind it was a room full of screens and servers. On the monitors is his house, bedroom, kitchen, living room. In one of them, he saw himself sleeping in bed. In the other, he saw Melissa preparing breakfast. Tony felt his legs give way. He walked over to the table where there were folders labeled Project Emotional Limit. With trembling hands, he opened one. Inside were his photo, dates, notes. Subject, Anthony Baker. Purpose, to study commitment and responses to repeated emotional trauma. Condition, daily confessions of cheating from a partner. Next is the list. Chris Holden is a fake. Michael Jensen is a fake. Justin, Ryan, Eric are fictitious names. His friends, colleagues, even Dr. Crow were all labeled as participants. Tony collapsed into his chair, his breathing becoming ragged. Melissa, performer, actress, code M17. His wife was not real. Their marriage, their life, everything was an experiment. He was a test subject, a rat in a cage, and someone watched him break under the blows of her words. He grabbed another folder. There were graphs of his reactions: anger, forgiveness, despair, surveillance. They studied him, how he dealt with pain, how long he could last. At home that evening, Melissa approached him again. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the park. His name is Josh. It was today," she said, her voice filled with the usual guilt. Tony looked at her, and for the first time in months he didn't scream. He now saw her not as a wife, but as an actress playing a role. "Josh, huh?" he asked quietly, his tone icy. She nodded, crying. Sorry, Tony. I love you. He stood up, walked over to her, and grabbed her shoulders. How much are you getting paid for this? He asked, his voice shaking with rage. She blinked, her tears stopping. What? What are you talking about, Tony? Her tone was confused, but he saw that it was too rehearsed. I found the cameras, Melissa, or whatever your name is, M17. I was in that warehouse. I know about the experiment, he blurted out, and her face turned pale. She opened her mouth, but didn't say anything, just looked at him like a hunted animal. Tony, I don't know what you're talking about, she began, but he interrupted. Stop lying. You are not my wife. You are an actress. All this Chris, Michael, Josh is fake. You've been playing with me for months, and I believed that this was real, he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. She dropped to her knees, her tears returning. Tony, please listen. I love you. This is true. I didn't mean to hurt you. You don't love me, he barked, recoiling. You are reading the script. Who is behind this? Who controls this? She was silent, her gaze falling to the floor. Tony turned away, his chest constricting with pain and anger. He knew the truth, but it did not free him, it suffocated him. His life was a lie, and he was a puppet in someone's hands. And yet, somewhere deep inside, he still heard her voice, I love you, and did not know what to believe. Tony could no longer stay in this house, in this city, in this life that turned out to be fake. After he found cameras and documents in an abandoned warehouse, after realizing that his marriage to Melissa was part of an experiment and she was an actress, he decided to run away. He didn't know who was behind all this, but he felt that if he stayed, he would completely lose himself. His mind was on edge and his heart was broken. On Sunday evening, after another confession from Melissa, he made a decision. He would leave Philadelphia, away from this nightmare. She was sitting on the sofa. Her blue blouse was slightly wrinkled. Her eyes were full of tears. Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the cinema, his name is Adam. It was today, she said, her voice shaking as always. Tony looked at her, clenching his fists. He no longer shouted, he simply nodded, recorded her words on the recorder, and went into the bedroom. There he threw a change of clothes, a laptop, a voice recorder, and car keys into a bag. He didn't say a word to her. He just went downstairs, took his jacket, and headed for the door. Tony, where are you going? She asked, getting up from the sofa, her tone full of worry. Get out of here, he said over his shoulder without turning around. I can't stand it anymore. She stepped towards him, holding out her hand. Please don't go. I love you. We can fix everything. He stopped, his hand frozen on the doorknob. Her words, the same ones she repeated every time, sounded like a broken record. He turned around, his gaze cold. You don't love me, Melissa. You are playing a role. I know the truth, and I'm leaving. She opened her mouth, but he slammed the door, preventing her from answering. Tony got into the car, started the engine, and drove out onto the road. His plan was simple: get to New York, find a motel, and then decide what to do next. He turned on the radio to drown out his thoughts, but Melissa's voice, I cheated on you, still sounded in his head. The road was empty, the streetlights cast long shadows, and he drove, feeling the adrenaline rushing through his temples. He had almost reached the exit from the city when lights flashed ahead. An accident. Two trucks collided, blocking the highway. The police waved their batons, redirecting the cars back. Tony cursed, slamming the steering wheel. He turned around and drove the other way, through the northern suburbs, but a bad feeling was already brewing inside him. On the next exit, he was stopped by a bell. The phone vibrated in my pocket, the number of the boss, Mr. Harris. Tony frowned. It was almost 11 at night. He replied, holding the steering wheel with one hand. Tony, we have an emergency. Harris' voice was tense. The client requires an urgent report by morning. We need you in the office right now. I can't, Tony snapped. I'd like to check out. Find someone else. Tony, this is not up for debate, Harris insisted. If you don't come, we will lose the contract. Do you want to be unemployed? Tony clenched his teeth. He knew that Harris was part of the experiment, a fake like everyone else, but the threat sounded real. He hung up the call and continued driving, but 5 minutes later the phone rang again. Steve, a colleague. "Tony, old man, where are you? Harris is furious. He says you should be here." Tony turned off the phone, throwing it on the seat, but the feeling of anxiety grew. He turned onto the bypass road, but there was a traffic jam waiting for him. The bus broke down, blocking the lane. He was stuck for half an hour until the road was cleared. The next morning, he tried again. Melissa greeted him in the kitchen with a smile. "Good morning, honey. Would you like some coffee?" He didn't answer, just grabbed the keys and left. In the evening, she admitted to cheating with a guy from the bank named Owen, but he no longer listened. His thoughts were busy running away. He decided to leave during the day to avoid surprises at night. On Monday, he got into his car, drove onto the highway, and almost reached the city limits when there was a loud bang. A tire burst. Tony pulled over, cursed, and opened the trunk. The spare tire was lowered. He called a tow truck, but it took 3 hours for it to arrive, and by then the rain had driven him back home. In the evening, Melissa came up again. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you with the guy from the flower shop. His name is Peter. It was today." He wrote down her words, looking into space. "Aren't you going to get tired of this?" he asked quietly. She cried, "I love you, Tony. I'm sorry." He went to the bedroom, but sleep did not come. He thought about how the world would not let him in. On Tuesday, he decided to leave by bus. He bought a ticket to Baltimore, left the car at home, and walked to the station. Melissa didn't know he just left while she was in the shower. He boarded the bus feeling faintly hopeful, but 10 minutes later the driver announced, "There's a problem with the engine, folks. We'll have to go back." The passengers groaned and Tony clenched his fists. A surprise awaited him at the station. The phone he had left at home rang in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out, not understanding how it got there. On the screen is a call from Mark, a friend. "Tony, Emma fell off her grandmother's bike. It's nothing serious, but she wants to see you." Tony turned off his phone, but guilt forced him to return home. That evening, Melissa said, "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the gym. His name is Zach. It was today." He nodded, wrote it down, and went to bed, feeling the walls tighten around him. The next day he tried again. He took a taxi to the airport, deciding to fly anywhere. He bought a ticket to Chicago, checked in, but 5 minutes before boarding they announced, "The flight has been canceled due to technical problems." Tony collapsed onto the bench, his hands shaking. The phone rang. Harris. "Tony, a client wants you in the office. It's urgent." He hung up the call, but a minute later a message came from Steve. "Old man, come back, otherwise you will be fired." He returned home, defeated. Melissa was waiting for him, her eyes filled with tears again. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the library. His name is Neil. It was today," she said, and her voice was the same as always. Tony looked at her, his face blank. "Neil, huh?" he asked tiredly. She nodded. "Sorry, Tony. I love you." He went into the office, closed the door, and sat down at the table. His attempts to escape failed. An accident, calls, breakdowns, urgent matters. Every time something stopped him, as if an invisible hand was holding him in this city, in this house, in this experiment. He pulled out the documents from the storage room that he had hidden in a drawer and reread. Project Emotional Limit. Subject, Anthony Baker. They didn't just watch him, they controlled everything. His car, his job, even the weather. He was in a cage, and the world wouldn't let him leave. Tony held his head in his hands, his breathing becoming ragged. He didn't know how to escape, but he felt he had to find a way. Melissa knocked on the door, her voice soft. "Tony, are you okay?" He didn't answer. His mind was screaming, but his body was too tired to move. He was locked, and someone or something was watching his every move. Tony Baker is tired of being a victim. Months of Melissa's endless admissions of infidelity, repeated details, strange obstacles preventing him from leaving the city, and the discovery that his life is an experiment have broken him. but not completely. He found cameras, documents, and realized that his friends, colleagues, and even his wife were fakes, part of the emotional limit project. They played with him, explored his pain, his devotion, his limits. But now he decided that enough was enough. He will no longer be a puppet. Tony decided to break the system, pretend to obey, and secretly develop an escape plan and destroy those who control this nightmare. It all started on Wednesday morning. He woke up, as usual, next to Melissa, who was sleeping, snoring quietly. Her blue blouse was hanging on the chair, the same one that she wore every time before confessing. Tony looked at her, his anger turning to cold determination. He won't shout anymore, won't argue. He will play by their rules, but only on his own terms. He got up, got dressed, and went down to the kitchen, where Melissa soon appeared with her usual smile. "Good morning, honey. Coffee?" she asked, her voice soft as always. "Yes, thank you," Tony replied, forcing himself to smile. It was the first smile he'd had in months, but it was a fake one, a mask he'd put on to deceive them. She placed the mug in front of him, and he nodded, pretending everything was fine. He was seething inside, but outside he was calm. They were watching him through the cameras, through her eyes, through everything around her. He should have been smarter. In the evening, like clockwork, she approached him in the living room. Her face turned pale, her eyes filled with tears. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the supermarket. His name is Kevin. It was today," she said, her voice shaking. Tony looked at her, holding back the urge to scream. Instead, he nodded, his tone even. "Okay, Mel, thank you for telling me." He turned on the recorder, recorded her words, and added, "I forgive you." She blinked, surprised by his calmness. "Tony, are you okay?" she asked, her tears stopping. "Yes," he replied, smiling. "I just want us to be together." She nodded, wiping her face, and went to bed. Tony remained in the living room, staring into the darkness. He knew that they were watching, listening, and analyzing. His forgiveness was part of the plan, let them think that he was broken, that he accepted their game. But in his head, he was already building a strategy. He remembered the warehouse where he found the documents. The camera signal came from there, but it was too simple. If this is an experiment, the control center should be somewhere else, closer, more powerful. He decided to figure it out. The next day, he went to work as usual. He behaved impeccably in the office, joked with Steve, smiled at Harris, turned in his report on time. His colleagues smiled strangely at him, as always, but he pretended not to notice. At lunchtime, he retired to a bathroom stall with his laptop and started digging. He downloaded the data from the cameras he had saved and ran a program to analyze the signals. The IP address pointed to the warehouse, but Tony noticed a secondary stream, a weak, encrypted signal going deeper into the city. He spent hours cracking the code until he got the coordinates, an abandoned lot 5 miles from their house, underneath an old shopping center that had closed 10 years ago. Tony wrote down the address on a notepad, put it in his pocket, and went back to work, pretending to be busy. That evening, Melissa confessed again. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the auto repair shop. His name is Derek. It was today." He nodded, wrote it down, and said, "It's okay, Mel. I love you." She looked at him with slight confusion, but smiled. "Thank you, Tony." He hugged her coldly, mechanically, and went into the office, where he continued planning. He decided to check his suspicions. On Friday, he tried to leave again. He took the car and headed to the exit of the city, observing how the system reacted. This time he was stopped by a traffic jam, a truck loaded with bricks overturned, blocking the road. The phone rang. Harris. "Tony, go to the office urgently. A client is waiting." He turned around, not out of fear, but to make sure that they would not let him go while the control center was working. This strengthened his resolve. The center was the key. Destroy it, and the cage would collapse. On Saturday, he started preparing. In the morning, he behaved like an ideal husband. He made Melissa breakfast, kissed her on the cheek, and said that he was going to the store for groceries. She smiled. "You're the best, Tony." He left, but instead of the store, he went to the shopping center. The building was abandoned, peeling paint, broken windows, an empty parking lot. He parked to the side, took a flashlight, a crowbar, and a bag of tools. The entrance was boarded up, but Tony crawled through the side door, feeling his heart pounding. The inside smelled musty, but he noticed Mark's fresh scratches on the floor leading to the basement. He went down the stairs and his suspicions were confirmed. There was a bunker underneath the shopping center steel doors, security cameras, the faint hum of servers. Tony turned off the flashlight and listened. Silence, but he knew that this place was the control center. He didn't come in, it's not time yet. He returned home to complete the plan. He needed more serious tools. Gasoline, wire cutters, something to disable the system. He decided to do it at night, when they would least expect it. In the evening, Melissa came up again. Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the cafe. It was today. Tony smiled, his voice soft. Thanks for telling me, Mel. I forgive you. He wrote down her words, hugged her, and added, You are everything to me. She relaxed, unaware that he saw right through her, an actress, a pawn in a game. At night, he collected everything he needed. In the garage, he found a can of gasoline and hid it in the trunk along with a crowbar and tin snips. He wrote a note in his diary. The center is under the shopping mall. Tonight, I will destroy it. They won't stop me. He left the recorder at home. There was no point in recording anymore. His plan was simple. Infiltrate the bunker, find the servers, disable them, and burn everything to hell. If this doesn't work, he'll at least show them he's not giving up. In the morning, he behaved as usual. Melissa made coffee, he drank it, smiled, talked about the weather. But inside, he was ready. He no longer fell for their tricks, accidents, calls, breakdowns. He knew they would try to stop him, but this time he was one step ahead. The control center was his target, and he would destroy it, no matter the cost. In the evening, she admitted again, Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With the guy from the park. It was today. He nodded, wrote it down, and said, I know, Mel. Everything is fine. She smiled, and he went into the bedroom, getting ready for the night. He waited until midnight, when the city was quiet, to strike. They thought they had broken it, but Tony Baker was going to prove otherwise. Tony Baker waited for midnight with cold determination. Months of emotional hell, Melissa's endless confessions, repeated details, and the realization that his life was an experiment had hardened him. He was no longer the man who blindly believed in love and family. Now he knew the truth. His house, his wife, his friends, everything was a fake, part of the emotional limit project. He located the control center under an abandoned shopping center, developed a plan, and collected everything he needed. A can of gasoline, a crowbar, wire cutters, a flashlight. Tonight he was going to break the system, destroy those who played with his mind. He no longer fell for their tricks, accidents, calls, urgent matters. He was ready. The day passed as usual. In the morning, Melissa came down to the kitchen, her blue blouse hanging on her, like a symbol of his nightmare. Good morning, Tony. Would you like some pancakes? She asked with her usual smile. He nodded, forcing himself to smile back. Yeah, Mel, that would be great, he said, his voice smooth, almost warm. She hummed while preparing breakfast, and he drank coffee, pretending that everything was fine. They watched him through the cameras, through her words, through every step. But he played a role to lull their vigilance. In the evening, she came up, as always, her face turned pale, her eyes filled with tears. Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you. With a guy from the gym, his name is Tyler. It was today, she said, her voice shaking. Tony looked at her, holding back the storm inside. He nodded, turned on the recorder, and wrote down, Tyler, gym today. Then he smiled. Thank you for saying that, Mel. I forgive you. She blinked, her tears stopping. Tony, aren't you mad? She asked, her tone surprised. No, he answered softly. I just want us to be together. She nodded, hugged him, and he hugged her back, feeling the coldness of her skin. It was a lie, but a perfect lie. When she went to bed, Tony waited until midnight. He put on a black jacket, took a bag with tools, and quietly left the house. The car was in the garage, a can of gasoline was in the trunk. He started the engine, turned off the headlights, and drove towards the shopping center, keeping to the side streets. The city was asleep, the streetlights cast a dim light, and Tony felt the adrenaline rushing through his temples. He parked a half-mile from his target, grabbed his bag, and walked away, avoiding the cameras on the poles. He knew they could be watching, but he hoped his calmness during the day had confused them. The abandoned shopping center looked ominous in the darkness, broken windows, peeling paint, silence. Tony climbed through the side door, just like last time, and turned on the flashlight, pointing the beam downward. The scratches on the floor still led to the basement. He walked down the stairs, each step echoing in his ears. At the bottom there was a steel door with a combination lock and a camera above it. Tony turned off the flashlight, took out the wire cutters, and cut the camera wires. The red light went out. He remembered the code from the data from the house cameras 0115 and entered it. The lock clicked and the door opened. Behind it was a bunker, a long corridor with dim lamps, the hum of the servers coming from the depths. Tony stepped inside, his heart pounding, but he moved quietly, listening. The corridor led to a large room, illuminated by the cold light of monitors. The walls were covered with screens on which frames flashed: his house, kitchen, bedroom, office. In one he saw Melissa sleeping in bed, in the other he saw himself sitting in the office with a voice recorder. His stomach clenched, but he forced himself to continue. In the center of the room was a table littered with folders and a server rack with blinking lights. Tony walked up to the desk, his hands shaking as he opened the first folder. The cover read, Project Emotional Limit. Subject, Anthony Baker. Cycle 137. He froze, rereading the words. Cycle 137. He flipped through the pages. There were dates, records of his reactions, graphs. Cycle 1. Chris Holden, the first betrayal. Reaction, anger, attempt at forgiveness. Cycle 2. Michael Jensen. Reaction, rage, second forgiveness. And so on. Justin, Ryan, Eric, Kyle, Lucas, Sean, dozens of names, hundreds of cycles. His life was divided into stages, each marked by her confessions and his pain. He opened another folder, Project Purpose, Study of Human Behavior Under Repeated Emotional Torture. Task, to determine the limit of the subject's devotion and resistance to betrayal. Tony felt the blood drain from his face. They didn't just watch, they broke it, day after day, to see when it would break. Funding. X Corporation, confidential. No names, just the letter X and the logo, a black circle with a red line. His mind was spinning. Who are these people? Why him? He approached the server, where data was spinning on the screen. Tony connected his laptop, cracked the password, the same 0115, and started digging. There were videos of himself screaming at Melissa, crying in the bedroom, listening to the recorder. Audio files of her confessions, hundreds of hours of her voice. I cheated on you. With a guy from... The names changed, but the words remained the same. He found a map, a network of cameras throughout the city, blocking points, highways, train stations, airports. This explained the accidents, calls, breakdowns. They controlled everything to keep him in the cage. Tony collapsed into his chair, his breathing becoming ragged. He was a test subject, a rat in a maze, and Melissa was a tool. Her tears, her "I love you," everything was part of the script. He remembered her last confession about Tyler and realized she would play this role tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, again and again, until he breaks. But it won't break. He will destroy it. He flipped through another folder. Participants. Steve, actor, code 09. Harris, actor, code H03. Dr. Crow, consultant, code L12. Even the children, Emma and Jacob, were labeled as voice imitations, remote participation. Tony closed his eyes, feeling tears burning his eyelids. His family, his life, everything was a lie. He was alone, locked in this experiment, and the X Corporation sat somewhere in the shadows, counting his suffering. He stood up, his hands shaking with anger. The servers hummed, maintaining this false reality. He grabbed a can of gasoline, unscrewed the cap, and began to spray on counters, tables, and folders. The smell of gasoline filled the room, mingling with his rage. He didn't know who X was, but they would pay. He took out his lighter, but stopped, looking at the screen. Melissa was there, awake, sitting on the bed, staring into space. Her face was blank, like a doll's. Tony clenched his jaw. She was an actress, but he still saw her as his wife, the one he loved. "Tony, I need to tell you something." Her voice rang in his head, echoing through all the loops. He pushed aside the memories, flicked his lighter, and threw it on the floor. The fire flared up, licking the papers, then the servers. The screens flickered, the hum replaced by a crash. Tony retreated to the door, watching the flames consume his prison. He didn't know what would happen next, but this was his first step towards freedom. He ran down the corridor, the smoke stinging his eyes. At the top, he breathed in the night air, feeling the heat of the bunker leave behind him. His car was waiting in the dark, and he got behind the wheel without looking back. They could have stopped him again, but he showed them he wasn't giving up. The control center was burning, and with it, his cycles, his pain. Tony started the engine, ready for the next move, although he didn't know what lay ahead. Tony Baker stood in the center of a bunker beneath an abandoned shopping mall, surrounded by humming servers and flashing screens. The fire he almost started remained in his imagination. He changed his mind at the last moment. The lighter was in his pocket, and a can of gasoline stood against the wall, untouched. Destroying everything with flames was too easy, too fast. The X Corporation, the creators of Project Emotional Limit, deserved better. They broke him for months, learning his pain, his devotion, his limits. Now he will break their system from the inside. He won't just run away, he'll make them regret choosing him as a test subject. The room was cold despite the warmth of the servers. Frames of his life flashed on the screens: the kitchen where Melissa prepared breakfast, the bedroom where she confessed to cheating, the living room where he forgave her again and again. Tony clenched his fists, his breathing heavy. He found folders containing records of all his cycles, 137 stages of emotional torture, each marked with her words, "I cheated on you." He found out that his friends, colleagues, even children are fake, and Melissa is an actress, code M17. But now he was here, in their lair, and he was going to destroy everything. He sat down at the terminal, connected his laptop to the server, and began hacking. The password 0115 worked again, opening access to the system. The screen is filled with lines of code, graphs, and data streams. Tony was not a programmer, but years of working with financial systems taught him to understand the logic of programs. He found the main file, Emotion Limit Control EXE, and opened it. This was the heart of the experiment: the scripts that controlled Melissa, the cameras, the obstacles that prevented him from leaving. He saw lines marked with his name: Subject, Anthony Baker. Reaction to Cycle 137, Forgiveness, Suppressed Anger. They predicted it, manipulated it, but not today. Tony started changing the code. He didn't know what exactly he was doing, but he acted instinctively. He deleted commands, rewrote conditions, introduced chaos. He changed Melissa's script, removing her confessions and replacing them with random phrases. He turned off the cameras, redirecting the signal to an empty channel. He erased data about obstacles, accidents, calls, breakdowns, replacing them with empty loops. His fingers flew across the keyboard, sweat ran down his temples, and his heart was pounding with adrenaline. It was sabotage, not fire, but digital destruction that they couldn't fix quickly. The screens began to flicker, images of his home becoming distorted. The hum of the servers became uneven, as if the system was suffocating. Tony smiled for the first time in months. It was a real smile. He injected a virus he found in old files on a laptop, simple but destructive code that could loop servers until they overheated. He was almost finished when the bunker door clanged open. Tony turned around, his hand hovering over the enter key. Melissa entered the room. Her blue blouse was slightly wrinkled, her hair was disheveled, and her face was pale, like a ghost. She didn't look like an actress confidently playing a role, but like someone out of control. Her eyes were red, her hands were shaking. Tony stood up, clutching the crowbar that lay nearby. "How did you end up here?" he asked, his voice hoarse with tension. "Tony, please stop," she said, her tone pleading. She stepped forward, holding out her hands. "You don't understand what you're doing." He stepped back, his gaze turning icy. "I don't understand. I know everything, Melissa. Or whatever your name is, M17. You are not my wife. You're an actress, a pawn in their game. I found documents, cameras, and this bunker. You lied to me for months, breaking my heart every day, and now you're asking me to stop?" She fell to her knees, her tears dripping onto the concrete floor. "Tony, I didn't want this. I didn't choose this role. They forced me. I'm just part of the system. But I love you, I really do. You have to believe me." Tony laughed a bitter, ragged laugh. "Do you love me? Are you serious? You told me this after every confession, Chris, Michael, Tyler, hundreds of names, and I believed you, forgave you, until I found out that it was all fake. You don't love me, you're reading the script." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, Tony, it's not like that. Yes, I started as an actress. They gave me the role and said it was an experiment and that you wouldn't get hurt. But then, I became attached to you. You were so kind, so strong. I didn't mean to hurt you, but they control me. I can't stop." He looked at her, and his anger fought with pain. Her words sounded sincere, but he no longer believed. He saw the folders and knew that she was a tool programmed to break him. "You're a pawn, Melissa," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "You are not a person, you are their puppet, and I will not stop until I destroy this system." She crawled towards him, her hands reaching for his legs. "Tony, if you do this, everything will collapse, not only for them, but also for us. I don't know what will happen to me if you break the servers. Maybe I'll disappear, maybe I'll lose everything I feel for you. Please don't do this." He stumbled back, clutching the crowbar tighter. "For us, we're gone, Melissa. You are the code in their program, and I am their test subject. Do you think I'll believe your tears after everything you've done? Every day a new name, a new lie. You destroyed me, and now you ask for mercy." Her face contorted with despair. "Tony, I remember every cycle. Chris, Michael, Derek, Tyler, I hate myself for this. But I couldn't stop, they controlled me. I tried to resist, but the voice in my head, it forced me to speak. I'm a pawn, yes, but I feel it, Tony. I love you, and this is not part of their plan." He froze, her words cutting into him like a knife. Part of him wanted to believe the part that still remembered their first dance, their laughter, their life before this nightmare. But he pushed the feeling away, gritting his teeth. "You're lying," he said coldly. "You always lied. This is another trick to stop me, but I'm done believing you." "Tony, no," she shouted, standing up and rushing towards him. She grabbed his hand, her fingers digging into his skin. "If you press this button, you will kill me. I'm not an actress anymore. I'm part of the system, but I'm alive. Prove that you are better than them. Stop for me." He pulled his hand away, his eyes burning. "Better than them? They ruined my life, and you helped them. You are not alive. You are a program, a doll that they pull the strings. I won't stop, Melissa. You lost me a long time ago." She fell to the floor, sobbing. "Tony, please. I love you." Her voice was weak, broken, but he turned away. He walked over to the terminal, his finger hovering over enter. Screens flickered, servers hummed, and her sobs echoed through the room. He didn't believe her, he couldn't believe her after everything. This was the system's last attempt to hold him, but he was stronger. "Goodbye, Melissa," he said quietly and pressed a key. The code ran, and the virus began to devour the system. The screens went dark, the servers began to spark. The hum was replaced by a crash. Melissa screamed, her hands pressed to her head as if she were struggling with something inside. Tony looked at her, his heart sank, but he didn't stop. He didn't know what would happen next, but the system was collapsing, and that was his victory. She looked up, her face wet with tears. "Tony, what have you done?" she whispered, and her voice broke off. He turned away, looking at the smoking servers. He didn't believe her, but her words still cut him like a knife. The sabotage was completed, and now he waited to see what would happen. Okay, let's continue the story. This chapter will be as long and expansive as possible, with an emphasis on the launch of the virus, the destruction of the system, the distortion of reality, and Tony's internal state. We remain within the framework of the plot, without getting ahead of ourselves beyond what is indicated. Minimum 1,300 words. Here it is. Tony Baker stood in front of a terminal in a bunker underneath an abandoned shopping mall, his fingers still trembling over the enter key. The servers hummed, the screens flickered, reflecting his fake life: the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, where he suffered for months from Melissa's confessions. She lay on the floor behind him, her blue blouse wet with tears, and her voice cracking. "Tony, what have you done?" He didn't turn around. He didn't believe her. He couldn't believe her after everything he'd learned. She was a pawn of the system, part of Project Emotional Limit, created by X Corporation to break it. But now he was breaking them. The virus he had introduced into the code was ready, a chaotic program capable of destroying the servers, erasing their control over his reality. This was his last blow. The screens flashed faster, lines of data distorted into a meaningless string of characters. Tony took a deep breath, feeling sweat running down his back. He pressed enter, and the virus came to life. At first, nothing happened, just a faint beep from the servers, as if they were resisting. But then the hum became louder, sharper, turning into a howl, as if the car was screaming in pain. The screens began to go dark one by one, images of his house dissolving into black spots. Tony stepped back, his heart pounding and his hands clenched into fists. He did it. He was destroying their system. Melissa jumped up, her eyes wide with horror. "Tony, stop it. You don't understand what will happen," she shouted, rushing to the terminal. Her fingers reached for the keyboard, but he grabbed her hand, pulling her back. "No," he said, his voice cold and hard. "You won't stop me. This is the end." She pulled away, her face contorted in panic. "You will kill us both. I'm part of this system, Tony. If it collapses, I don't know what will happen to me." He looked at her, and for a moment his resolve wavered. Her tears seemed real, her voice trembled with fear, and not with theatrical guilt, as before. But he remembered the folders, the notes, the 137 cycles of her lies. "I cheated on you. With the guy from..." He remembered Chris, Michael, Tyler, all the fake lovers she called to break his heart. This was her role, and he no longer believed a single word she said. "You're not real, Melissa," he said quietly. "You are their tool, and I won't let you keep me in a cage." The servers sparked, and smoke began to rise from the racks, filling the room with the acrid smell of burnt wiring. The screens finally went dark, and the lights in the bunker flickered, casting shadows on the walls. Melissa fell to her knees, her hands pressed to her head, as if she were struggling with something inside. "Tony, it's breaking. I can feel it," she whispered, her voice becoming choppy, like a signal losing connection. He turned away, looking at the terminal. The virus worked, the code it rewrote was devouring the system, erasing their control. But then he felt the floor beneath his feet shake. At first it was barely noticeable, a slight vibration, as if from a distant earthquake. Tony frowned, placing his hand on the table to steady himself. But the shaking intensified, the walls of the bunker began to crack, and dust fell from the ceiling. He looked at Melissa. She was sitting with her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes empty. "What's happening?" he asked, but she didn't answer. She just shook her head, her lips trembling. Tony turned towards the exit, but the corridor along which he had come began to distort. The walls were bent like rubber. The light from the lamps flickered, turning into a strobe. He grabbed his bag of tools and ran to the door, but the world around him was collapsing. The floor under his feet became soft like dough, each step sinking in, slowing him down. The walls squeezed and stretched, emitting a low rumble, as if reality itself was bursting at the seams. Tony turned around. Melissa was still there, but her figure was starting to blur, like a picture on an old TV with static. Her blue blouse flickered, appearing and disappearing, and her voice became an echo. "Tony, you ruined everything." He didn't stop. He broke out into the corridor, but it was no longer a corridor. The space was curved. The ceiling was lowering, and the staircase leading up turned into a spiral going into the darkness. Tony dropped the bag, clutching the crowbar, and ran, feeling the air become thick like syrup. His legs sank, his breath came out of his chest with difficulty. He reached the exit, but the abandoned shopping center had disappeared. Instead, there was emptiness, black as an abyss, with spots of light floating in it like stars. Tony froze, his mind screaming in terror. The virus didn't just destroy the servers, it destroyed his reality. Everything he knew, the house, the city, Melissa, was connected to this system, and now it was falling apart. He turned back, but the bunker had disappeared, leaving only the smoking wreckage of the servers floating in the air like pieces of a broken puzzle. Melissa stood in the center of this void, her body trembling like a hologram. "Tony, bring me back." Her voice was weak, distorted, and she extended her hand, but her fingers began to dissolve, turning into pixels. He stepped back, his heart pounding. "You're not real," he repeated, but the words sounded uncertain. Her face, the same face he had loved for 12 years, was distorted. Her eyes became empty, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. Tony turned away, feeling the ground beneath him disappear. He fell not down, but somewhere into nowhere, into darkness that enveloped him like water. His consciousness began to fade. He felt how his body became light, how the air left his lungs. Images flashed around him: the kitchen where Melissa was making coffee, the children laughing in the garden, his office where Steve smiled his strange smile. But all this cracked like glass and dissolved into a black void. Tony screamed, but there was no sound, only silence pressing on his ears. His hands grabbed the air, but there was nothing there, only cold and darkness. He remembered her words: "If you break the system, I will disappear." He didn't believe it, but now he saw that it was the truth, or part of the truth. She was a pawn, but connected to this reality, and he destroyed her along with him. His mind was spinning, his thoughts were confused. What was real? Was he real, or also part of the code? He felt his consciousness slipping away, the darkness sucking him in like a funnel. His last thought was of Melissa, not an actress, not a pawn, but the woman he loved, the one who may never have existed. Tony closed his eyes, or thought he did, and there was only darkness all around. His body dissolved, his breathing stopped, and he plunged into emptiness. The world he knew had collapsed, and he didn't know what was coming next: freedom, death, or something else. The virus did its job, but the cost was higher than he could have imagined. He was falling into the unknown, and the last thing he heard was Melissa's weak, distorted voice. "Tony, I loved you." Tony fell into the darkness, his consciousness dissolving into the void, like sand blown away by the wind. The world around him collapsed, the servers in the bunker were smoking, reality was distorted, and Melissa's voice, weak and intermittent, faded in his head. "Tony, I loved you." He didn't know how long this fall lasted: seconds, hours, eternity. His body disappeared, his thoughts were confused, and he felt like he was falling into oblivion. The virus he launched destroyed the system, the emotional limit project, and X Corporation, but at the same time, it seemed to take him too. He closed his eyes, or were they already closed, and surrendered to this darkness. And then he woke up. Tony opened his eyes sharply, his chest heaving as if after a long run. He was lying in bed, a familiar bed, a soft blanket, a wooden headboard, the faint light of the morning breaking through the white curtains. His heart was pounding, sweat was running down his temples, but he was alive. He slowly turned his head, and next to him, Melissa was sleeping quietly. Her blonde hair was scattered on the pillow, her face was calm, without tears, without guilt. She looked the same as in those days when he still believed in their marriage, before all the cycles, before her confessions, before the experiment. Tony froze, afraid to move. Was this a dream, or did he get out? He sat up carefully, his hands shaking as he touched the edge of the bed. Everything seemed real: the creaking of the floorboards underfoot, the smell of coffee coming from below, the faint noise of cars outside the window. He got up, went to the window, and pulled back the curtain. The street was alive. A neighbor was walking his dog, a school bus was honking at the corner, and a woman with a stroller was walking along the sidewalk. People moved, talked, and laughed. No weird smiles, no repeating details. The calendar on the wall showed March 16th. The day was moving forward for the first time in months. Tony felt tears sting his eyes. He got out. The virus worked, the system collapsed, and he was free. He went downstairs. His steps were hesitant but light. The kitchen was the same: white cabinets, wooden countertops, coffee maker bubbling like in the old days. Tony poured himself a mug, inhaled the aroma, and took a sip. The taste was real, hot, alive. He sat down at the table, closed his eyes, and just breathed. For the first time in a long time, he did not expect a blow, did not expect her voice, did not expect pain. Maybe this was a new life: no cameras, no scripts, no X-corporation. He almost believed the nightmare was over. Footsteps were heard from above. Tony opened his eyes. His heart trembled slightly, but he forced himself to smile. Melissa came down, tying the belt of her blue robe, not that blue blouse, but the old, cozy robe she wore in the mornings. Her hair was disheveled, but she looked as fresh as the days when he still loved her unconditionally. "Good morning, honey," she said, her voice soft, without the hoarseness that came before confessions. She walked over, kissed him on the cheek, and took her mug. Tony looked at her, his tension slowly melting away. It was she, not an actress, not a pawn, but his Melissa, or so he wanted to think. "How did you sleep?" she asked, sitting down across from him. Her smile was warm, genuine, and Tony felt something inside him melt. "Okay," he lied, his voice a little hoarse. "And you?" she shrugged. "Okay, I had some weird dream, but I don't remember it." He nodded, trying not to show his fear. It was like their old mornings, before everything. He almost believed it was real. After breakfast, he decided to check out the world outside the house. He put on his jacket, told Melissa he was going to the store, and went outside. The air was fresh, with a slight smell of spring. Neighbors waved to him, but without the forced smiles that had haunted him before. Mrs. Jenkins was watering the flowers and muttered something about the weather. Her usual grumpiness had returned. The guy with the dog walked past without looking at him. Cars were honking, children were screaming on the playground. Tony walked down the street, his steps becoming more confident. He walked into a coffee shop, ordered a latte, and the barista just handed him the glass. "No winks, no, hang in there, buddy." Everything was normal, too normal. He returned home with a bag of groceries, feeling faintly hopeful. Maybe he really broke the system. The virus destroyed the servers, erased their control, and now he was free. Melissa met him in the kitchen, sorting out her groceries. "You bought my favorite cereal," she said with a smile, and Tony nodded, his heart squeezing with something akin to relief. They had lunched together, talked about little things, about work, about picking up the children from their grandmother. For the first time in months, he wasn't waiting for her confession. For the first time, he allowed himself to relax. The evening passed quietly. They were sitting in the living room, watching an old movie that they once loved. Melissa pressed herself against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and Tony felt the warmth of her body. He hugged her, his fingers touched her hair, and for a moment he believed that everything was back: their marriage, their life, their love. The movie ended, and she stretched, yawning. "I'll go to bed," she said, getting up. "Are you coming?" Tony nodded. "I'll be right there." She smiled and walked up the stairs, leaving him alone. He sat in the dark, staring at the blank TV screen. His mind was still alert, but his body was tired of fighting. He got up, turned off the light, and went to the bedroom. Melissa was already lying under the blanket. Her breathing was even. Tony lay down next to him, looking at the ceiling. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, sleep came quickly, without nightmares, without her voice in his head. But then he felt movement. Tony opened his eyes. Melissa was sitting on the bed. Her silhouette was dark in the twilight. She turned to him, her face pale, her eyes sparkling in the faint moonlight shining through the curtains. His heart sank. He knew that look, the same one that appeared before every confession. No, he thought, not this. He got out. He destroyed the system. This can't be true. "Tony," she said quietly, her voice trembling as always before these words. He sat up, His hands clenched into fists. His breathing became ragged. "Don't," he whispered, but she continued. Her eyes met his, and there was something strange in them, not guilt, not tears, but emptiness. "Tony, I need to tell you something. I cheated on you." Time has stopped. His blood froze in his veins, his body became numb. He looked at her, unable to utter a word. She repeated, her voice louder, but still shaking. "I cheated on you. With the guy from the cinema, his name is Adam. It was today." Tony felt a chill run down his spine as the world he had just accepted as real began to crack. He got out, he was sure of it. The virus burned the servers, destroyed the bunker, and erased their control. But her words, those damned words, came back like a ghost he couldn't destroy. "No," he managed, his voice breaking. "This is impossible. I broke the system. You can't. You shouldn't." He grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into her skin. "Tell me it's not true. Say it's the end." She looked at him, her face as motionless as a mask. "Tony, I love you," she said, but her voice was empty, mechanical, like a recording. "I'm sorry." And then he noticed her eyes were not blinking. Her breathing was too even. Her skin was cold, like plastic. She was here, but not alive, not real. Tony let go of her, staggering back. His mind was spinning. Did he get out or not? The world around him was normal, but her words sent him back into the cycle. Was this the end? Or the beginning of a new nightmare? He fell back onto the pillows, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Melissa lay down next to her. Her breathing became quiet again, as if nothing had happened. Tony lay in the dark, feeling the hope he had held all day died. He did not know what this meant: freedom, illusion, or a new round of experiment. But her words echoed in his head, and he realized that he might never get out. The end, or the beginning of a new cycle. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.